Welcome back. I'm Neil Chase, author of Iron Dogs, writer-director of the thriller feature Spin the Wheel. You can find links to both below. And today, let's talk about voiceover. You know that moment in a movie where a character's voice comes in over the visuals, either narrating their thoughts, telling you the story, or giving us information that the other characters don't hear. Now, what brought this to mind is that a few days ago, I consulted with a writer on a script that they wrote, which featured voiceover in a pretty big way. In fact, it was the only dialogue in the whole script. And that made it really important to nail down correctly. Now, this writer made a few mistakes with the voiceover in the script, and they're mistakes that I've seen before in other people's scripts. See, at its best, voiceover can be powerful. It can pull us directly into a character's mind. It can frame a story as a memory or as a confession. It can guide us through a complicated world, make it feel personal. Think about Goodfellas, The Shawshank Redemption, Fight Club, movies that kind of wouldn't be the same without that voiceover narration. But here's the thing. Voiceover is just a storytelling tool. And like any tool, it only works if you use it the right way. See, too often filmmakers treat voiceover as a crutch, something to patch up weak storytelling, explain what should be already clear, or dump backstory that the script couldn't figure out how to show. That's why voiceover gets a bad reputation. People say it's lazy, but it's not lazy if it's done well. It's only lazy when it's misused. So today, I want to show you the biggest mistakes to avoid when writing voiceover, with examples of movies that got it wrong and movies that got it right. So by the end, you'll know how to make voiceover one of the most effective tools in your storytelling arsenal. And stick around to the end for a bonus mistake that's the easiest to miss on the one hand and the hardest to get right on the other. So grab your popcorn. Let's get started. But first, hit that like button, subscribe for more writing tips videos just like this one, and ring the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Okay, let's start with the most common voiceover mistake writers make. And I don't mean just beginners. I've seen writers of all levels do this. The first mistake is telling us what we already see. See, using voiceover to describe what the audience can already see on screen is a pretty big one. Film's a visual medium. We don't need a narrator telling us it rained that night if we can already see rain pouring down. I mean, that's not voiceover, that's redundancy. And redundancy kills momentum. A bad example of this would be the original theatrical cut of Blade Runner. It's pretty much infamous for this. The studio forced Harrison Ford to record narration explaining things that were pretty much obvious from the visuals. At one point, Deckard says, "Sushi, that's what my wife called me, cold fish," while we literally see him brooding. His performance already shows that detachment. The narration just drags it down a level. So here's a pro tip. Use voice to reveal what we can't see. Inner thoughts, hidden fears, contradictions, backstory that doesn't fit naturally into dialogue. In other words, subtext. Think of it as the secret layer to your story. I mean, a great example of this is Goodfellas. Henry Hill's narration isn't repeating the visuals. It's pulling us into the world of the mafia, explaining rules, motivations, and the thrill of being on the inside. The visuals show us the world. The voiceover makes us feel like we belong to it. Another pitfall is treating voiceover like a lecture hall, dumping world building and backstory on the audience instead of letting them experience it. It's a case of telling, way too much telling, versus simply showing through character actions and dialogue. A bad example of this would be The Last Airbender. The movie opens with this long slab of narration explaining the mythology, the war, the four nations. Instead of showing us through action and character, it front loads all the rules of the world. And the result? Well, it feels like homework before the story even begins. So here's a pro tip. Don't use voiceover to explain the rules of the world. Use it to give us a perspective on the world. Let the visuals handle the storytelling. See, narration should add flavor, personality, or insight, not become this textbook that makes you wonder, hey, is there a quiz later? A great example of this would be The Big Lebowski. The stranger's voice doesn't over-explain bowling history or the dude's background. Instead, it sets the tone. It frames the dude as this unlikely, legendary figure. It's playful, ironic, and fits the mood perfectly. That leads us to mistake number 3. Replacing emotion with narration. This is a subtle one, using voiceover to tell us how a character feels instead of letting us see it for ourselves. It's different from mistake number 1 in that it deals specifically with the emotional beats that a character is experiencing in the scene with voiceover. So a bad example of this would be Twilight. Bella's narration constantly explains her emotions. She's nervous, she's in love, she's overwhelmed. But the visuals and performances already show us that. Instead of deepening the experience, it just kind of flattens it. It's like somebody whispering in your ear during a movie. See, she's nervous. See, she's in love. Yeah, we got it. So here's a pro tip. Use voiceover to reveal the contradiction between what's shown and what's felt. Let the visuals show one thing, while the narration exposes something deeper or even opposite in the character. That's where it gets interesting. See, a great example of this would be Fight Club. On screen, we see the narrator's dull office life, but the narration reveals his disgust with the world and this rage bubbling under the surface. It also clues us in on his fragile mental state and the yearning he holds for some kind of meaningful connection, even if it's self-destructive. That tension between what we see and what we hear makes the story dynamic on all levels. And finally, our bonus mistake, which many writers miss altogether. Voiceover that doesn't match the tone. See, tone is the writer's attitude toward the subject matter, or even toward the audience, expressed through stylistic choices such as word choice and sentence structure. In voiceover, this refers to the narrator's voice and how they see their world. It can be comedic or serious, playful or critical, really any kind of emotional anchor for the story. In other words, narration has to fit the tone of the movie. If it doesn't, it creates confusion. A bad example of this would be Suicide Squad. The flashy, jokey narration introducing the characters doesn't really match the gritty chaos of the movie. It feels, and rightly so, like two films mashed into one, mostly due to the extensive rewrites made to what was supposed to be a dark and gritty film in the vein of the Snyderverse DC movies that preceded it. But thanks to the success of Marvel films like Guardians of the Galaxy, much of the tone shifted to comedic and lighthearted in the narration. So instead of pulling us in, it feels inconsistent and jarring. So here's a pro tip. Before writing narration, ask yourself, whose voice is this? The tone should match both the character and the film's world. If it's dark and gritty, keep the narration raw. If it's comedic, well then let the voiceover lean into the humor. It should amplify the tone, not fight against it. A great example of this would be American Psycho. Patrick Bateman's narration is cold, ironic, and disturbing, exactly like the movie itself. So when he describes his skincare routine with the same intensity he gives to murder, it's both hilarious and horrifying at the same time. So let's recap. The biggest don'ts I typically see writers making in writing voiceover are: don't use voiceover to tell us what we already see. Don't use it as a lazy exposition dump. Don't let it replace emotion that should be shown. And don't let it clash with the tone of your movie. Bottom line, if you're not sure you're doing it right, ask yourself these questions when writing voiceover. Does the narration reveal something we can't see? Does it add personality, perspective, or tone? Does it fit the style of the movie? And would the story feel weaker without it? If the answer is yes to these questions, well, your voiceover belongs in the story. If not, it's probably a crutch, and you're better off without it altogether. Remember, voiceover isn't lazy. Bad voiceover is lazy. Good voiceover can elevate your story. So when you sit down and write narration, don't just ask, what can I explain? Ask, what secret, perspective, or truth can only this voice give the audience? That's when voiceover becomes magic. But hey, these are just my 2 cents. Give me yours. What movie do you think used voiceover the best, and why? And if you want to go deeper into learning the basics and writing scripts that actually get finished, well then check out my Zero to Hero Screenwriting for Beginners course. It's 12 weeks of one-on-one instruction from me to cover everything from fundamentals to actionable assignments that get you real results. You'll find the link in the description below. So until next time, stay creative.